Better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
And because they haven't got time to look at anything else, they haven't got time to research, they haven't got time to question, they will stick their head in the sand. And by the way, this is not me denigrating that way of thinking, because that is the majority. Most people will do that.
That was me.
Yeah,
it was
you.
me.
Exactly. I think, in a way, we all need a traumatic event to wake us up.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and you know, thankfully we've got people using, you know, the squatty potty.
Yeah.
I really don't want one of those because of that stupid name. But
no, the chair, I'm sure, has a lot to answer for health-wise. Of course it does. Right.
I am going to eat a little bit whilst we chat.
That's fine.
You've got one of those, haven't you?
Yep.
Spaniel.
Working cocker.
Cocker, yeah.
Yeah, they're great. They are fantastic dogs.
Are you not going to eat?
No, I'll dabble. I'm just grazing.
Like a cow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like.
I'll tuck into this grass in a minute.
Yeah, do that.
Gone from carnivore to...
Make great content.
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
I thought, screw it. Yeah.
Yeah. Meet Tom, ex-carnivore.
Who then... Yeah.
So, tell me about your carnivore.
About my carnivore. Okay.
You've stopped.
Yeah. I have. So I did it for 7 months. And why did I do it? I basically did it because I tried various different diets. I'd done pescatarian, I'd done pretty much vegetarian, I'd done FODMAP, which is one very synonymous with helping gut health. I just tried all these different diets.
For me, when you said that, I was thinking of NoFap.
What? No, what FODMAP?
I was thinking, what's that got to do?
Yeah, no, I think NoFap's maybe a conversation for another time, but and I was just kind of losing. I'm not losing the will to live, but I think I kept having these gut symptoms, and obviously I was going through some serious anxiety problems, and I guess I was in a mode of just trying what if it sounded a bit out there and a bit extreme, and I was going to be receptive to it because I just wanted to find a quick way to try and resolve some of the woes that I was going through. And I came across a guy, I came across a Joe Rogan podcast with Jordan Peterson, right? And he cured, not cured, but he somewhat improved his depression by just eating carnivore. Yeah, it's a clip that went viral.
I didn't realise that,
because his daughter is now a huge carnivore advocate. She's made a fortune out of a profile based around eating meat.
Wow.
Yeah, Michaela Peterson. So I saw that and I was like, what? So all he's doing is eating steaks and butter and egg yolks, and I was like, wow, okay, well, I can do that. And then I kind of got allured to it by that, and then it got reinforced. My brother was following a guy called Tim Sheaf, who was a vegan. He was an out and out, one of the biggest vegans at the time, parkour runner, huge following, and he then switched to carnivore because he had gut symptoms, he became weak, he started seeing all these horrible symptoms from just eating plants. So immediately I was kind of getting all these different people and resources telling me that eating meat, maybe not eating enough meat, maybe if you ate it exclusively you would see a lot of benefits. And I started going down the rabbit hole of plant toxicity and what eating veg can cause if your health is compromised, particularly from a gut health perspective. And I think there is a train of thought that I believe in. I'm not sure if everyone is receptive to this, but I do believe that all health starts in the gut, and all disease is a manifestation of something that's rotten in the gut. And if, for instance, we're eating chickpeas or lentils or things that may not be conducive to our genetic makeup or complexion, maybe over time that can create inflammation that then causes all sorts of symptoms. So I kind of came across all this and I thought, what have I got to lose? So end of October, start of November, I then started eating steaks for breakfast, lunch and dinner, which was, I guess it was, it's been a real journey. Yeah, real journey.
What I think is interesting is that Tim Sheaf. Tim
Sheaf, yeah. Have you come across him?
Yeah, but only by name. I don't know him that much. what I find really interesting there is you are going from one extreme to the absolute other. He's not just a vegetarian, he's a vegan.
Yeah, exactly.
To go from a vegan to being a carnivore is quite a move. And it's kind of what you did, isn't it? You were vegetarian.
Yeah.
Or were you pescatarian?
Well, I'd eat mainly vegetables and rice with a bit of fish every now and again. And I thought red meat was like the plague. I'd seen What the Health and Cowspiracy,
the
Netflix documentaries,
yes.
and I saw them and thought, wow, red meat is horrible. It's evil.
The machine behind it is, absolutely.
Right, yeah. From a nutritional standpoint.
It's a great documentary, Cowspiracy.
Yeah, it is.
Somebody else should know. So, I think what's really interesting, therefore, is that something that could cause further harm? I mean, I don't think... You didn't go all in straight away, or did you? Did you go literally from one extreme to the other?
Yeah, that's how I roll.
It's kind of how I roll too. But that can cause problems in itself, can't it? Because your body has been used to one mechanism, one source of energy. So your biome is going, oh yeah, I can break that down easily. I figured that out. And then you chuck a blooming steak down there, and
all the time.
Your stomach's going, whoa, how do I get rid of this?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
what happened to you?
So I think it's quite common. Basically, what happens is within the first few weeks, because your microbiome basically just changes completely, because you don't need the same bacteria to digest all the vegetables or fruits that I was eating before. It just becomes meat. So your biome just flips on its head, and you have a lot of people talk about diarrhea. I think that's quite a common symptom with a lot of people that just go into it, because a lot of people talk about toxin dumping, where, for instance, things like spinach and leafy greens are very high in oxalates, and apparently we store them, and when you eat meat exclusively, your body has a way, it basically provides an outlet for your body to get rid of all these kind of stored toxins that have been accumulating over time through eating a more plant-based diet. So I definitely saw some, I guess the polite way of putting it, the manifestation of cleansing in that regard.
Nice. Do you think gluten as well? Because obviously we store a lot of gluten, don't we?
Yeah.
That's really difficult to get rid of.
Yeah. But I had a lot of mates being like, Tom, how are you going to the loo with no fibre?
Yeah.
Surely you need fibre.
Yeah.
And which was, I guess makes a lot of sense. We're told that you need fibre. High fibre diets are optimal for health. Roughage. You need your roughage and all. Exactly. And I ended up reading The Fibre Menace, a book all about how it's the contrast of that and how you don't need fibre. And actually my regularity, although I'd always struggled with regularity, so it took time, it got increasingly better, which is true a lot of people. I remember coming across a study actually in Australia, which was when it really kind of hit home for me, because it's fine, you know, I'm like you and other people that I know, sometimes anecdotes are powerful enough and you use them and you experiment with that, and that's fine. But I think when you see studies, it obviously reinforces it and validates it. And I came across a study in Australia that basically did different groups of people, high fibre diet, medium fibre diet, no fibre diet, and they all had different gut symptoms. And to cut the long story short, the group with the no fibre diet saw a cure in most cases, or a significant improvement in their symptoms. And that obviously contradicts everything we've been told, because before that I had all these gut problems, and then the doctor was telling me, have fig juice, eat more inulin, eat more psyllium husk, all these kind of fibre replacements, and it was just getting worse. So I was like, this isn't helping. And I think the analogy someone said to me was, if you're in a motorway that goes 3 or 4 lanes into 1 lane,
right,
if you keep putting more cars at the back into that funnel, it's obviously going to back up. So what you want to do is obviously wipe out the backup, so it can alleviate, and then you see an improvement. And I thought that made a lot of sense.
Nice analogy.
Yeah, right. A better way of putting it. But when I talk to people about it, they just, I think because, you know, for all my life I was told that you need fibre for the reasons that you do, it just, people, I think, struggle, I certainly did for a long time, struggle with that concept, but I was seeing myself the improvements that I was. But in my case, it took time, I'll be honest. I think a lot of people see improvements much quicker. I didn't see improvements for a couple of months. Definitely in my gut health. The mental health, I saw improvements more immediately, which was good.
In what sense?
I just felt calmer and more relaxed, and I just didn't feel so anxious. So obviously I couldn't, intuitively one would say that clearly I was eating something that was creating some form of inflammation that was that was contributing to my symptoms. And I think it makes a lot of sense, but I couldn't say what exactly. And I definitely, the mental health benefits were huge. I went from a state of being consciously anxious in all sorts of ways to far more present, far more myself, and far more just I guess resilient to day-to-day situations that I would have otherwise struggled with, which I thought was really interesting.
Do you think, so let's say for whatever reason, a person's psychological condition is due in part to an imbalance in the neurochemicals that are being produced, in part. It can't be sole,
right,
but in part.
Yeah.
So could therefore, given that so much energy is used to break down food, could it be that by replacing that mixture of foods, some of which are easy to break down, some of which aren't, that your body's then going, oh, thanks very much, because whilst it's not too easy for me to break that down, that's all I have to do. I just need to break down a steak. So therefore, the rest of the energy that I would normally use to break down all the other stuff that you shove down your neck, Tom, I no longer need that energy. So that energy can be poured into your psychology, your neurochemicals. I'm guessing, I don't know, but could it be that? Or
I think that's part of it, but I think it's obviously you're avoiding something that was clearly triggering you. I think they say 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. So intuitively, if you're putting something in there that's compromising on that ability to produce the neurochemicals, then you're going to see symptoms, right? Because you've got your gut that feeds up the vagus nerve into your brain, and that's going to be problematic. So I don't know if I think the energy aspect is definitely a component, but I think it's more the anti-nutrients that they call it, that you get in vegetables, which can be mitigated depending on your complexion, your constitution. People deal with it in different ways. And clearly I was having, I don't know, for argument's sake, I was eating a lot of spinach, and they're very high in oxalates. And that can be very triggering, and people can see all sorts of symptoms from that. Obviously, some people don't, and we all have different complexions. But I think the point being that there could be a food item that you're eating that you see, that you've been told is healthy, but yet your intuition, your body's telling you otherwise. And I think that's kind of the key outcome of this, is it's like, you know, we talk about a lot about intuition, don't we? So
gut.
Yeah.
gut
feeling. Exactly. Gut instinct.
That is the key, isn't it? And the thing is, you're not going to get gut feeling if all you're doing is you're blocking those signals through eating the wrong shit. Our problem now as humans is that we have been fed statements that we believe to be gospel simply because the majority of the population believe it. And now that's medical, diet, whatever. And so therefore we eat a food source because we've been told it's healthy. So we don't compute that it can't be healthy. It's not necessarily healthy for us. We just think, oh, hang on a second. I know that broccoli is really good for you. Therefore, if I eat that every day, which I do, then that's got to be good for me. But it might not be.
Exactly. It's so subjective. I think this is so interesting. I hear people say a healthy diet. I mean, even that. What is that? What even is that? It's so subjective, and it's like it's open to interpretation through what you know and believe, right? And I think it comes back to intuition. It really does. And I think I guess in the Western world, we're kind of taught to outsource our intuition, because then there's a transaction involved, and then there's someone who can make money out of you, right? Whereas in the East, you spend time in the East, it's amazing how in tune they are with the environment and themselves and what they tap into. I mean, it's completely opposite, but we in the West see that as a woo-woo, but no, that's how it should be, you know, the normal way. Knowledge is power, isn't it? But I guess too much knowledge can be stressful, and I guess you want to make sure that what you are tapping into is giving you the insight that you do. But now, as we're learning, even all the things that I thought were true and took as gospel have been completely contradicted. So it's like, where do we go?
So there is only one answer. We are all different. What works for you won't work for me necessarily. The only way you can figure this stuff out is by doing your own research, practicing, trying different things, experimenting. Does it work? Do I still feel good 3 months in? Right, I do, so therefore it's probably going to make me feel good for the rest of my life. However, let's do another test and field at 6 months just to make damn sure. If after 6 months, it's probably, if you're still feeling good, you've got no other negative symptoms, stick with it. And that's the only thing we can do.
I think it comes back to having an open mind.
Yeah.
Having an open mind, being curious, and being able to have a system where you can log it.
Through most of my life, nobody would ever question in the way that we do now.
Yeah.
It was all as read. You have cereal in the morning. Of course you should have breakfast. How on earth are you going to get through the day if you don't have breakfast?
Most important meal of the day.
Meat and 2 veg, and all these kind of other statements that we just took to be true. And in a way, our lives were much simpler because of that.
They were.
There is this anxiety that comes through an over-analysis of this stuff. But I think if you do it with the right mindset of knowing that you're going to make mistakes, that it's not in fact it's not a mistake, it's a learning experience, that so long as you don't put yourself in a position where you are significantly in poor health because of it, then all of it is a good thing to do and practice and try.
Absolutely.
Because you are going to figure out eventually what works for you, and you're going to thank yourself for doing it, because there will be others of a similar background that will be suffering. So once you've been on this planet, I never say age, as you know, but I always say once you've been on this planet for the amount of time that I have, then you start seeing those around you suffering. Not necessarily significantly suffering, but they will have conditions because of the degenerative nature of our human bodies. Mm-hmm. So it may well be that in 10 years' time I cop it, because I don't know, but all I do know is that what I now do makes me feel good, so I'm going to stick with it. There's probably some things that are causing me that are toxic. Because I don't know yet. Other than sugar, that's the only thing I know for certain I should not be eating as much as I do. But, it may well be that in another 10, 20 years' time, we then say avocados. How could you not know how toxic they were?
Well, that is coming out.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Polyunsaturated fats.
Shit.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me, why?
About omega-3s. It's amazing.
I'm cutting down from now.
Some of the avenues I've tapped into recently are now saying omega-3s are incredibly toxic, and omega-6s, which are found in vegetable fats, are so you've got saturated fat, monounsaturated, you've got polyunsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats are, from what I understand, very easily oxidized, and when something is oxidized in the body, it becomes carcinogenic and a problem, and create all sorts of issues. And apparently polyunsaturated fats you find in avocados and fish are the worst offenders. So they're now saying, it's now flipping on its head, where they're now saying saturated fat, have lots of saturated monounsaturated fat, but avoid at all costs polys. So, which is
right. Okay. Well, I tell you what that does. This is how I now think about
a bit of a segue.
No, this is really important because we are going to be fed these messages regularly now, some of which will be true.
Right.
So what that does to me is that for the last 6 months, I've been eating a lot of avocados.
Yep.
And that has now acted as a reminder that I need to cut down on my avocado consumption, simply because I've been eating a lot of one particular food source. Right. I'm not going to stop eating them until I see absolute evidence from a variety of sources that say that's really bad.
I mean, generally, you probably don't drink to excess. You don't smoke.
Not now.
You keep fit.
Mm-hmm.
You do your gardening. I think sometimes we kind of take these things and we're like, we get scared, and it's like, it's toxic. It's like, well, hang on, let's rewind. What am I doing right? Okay, I'm exercising. I'm getting a lot of bright light. I'm up early doing the breath work. I'm doing the cold exposure. Hang on, if I'm having an avocado every day and maybe one more than I should, I think in the grand scheme of things, going to be marginal,
isn't
it?
Agree. I actually totally agree.
And if that gives you emotional fulfillment from eating it, I think that far outweighs maybe the little bit of toxicity that over time may cause a problem, but relative to everything else, I think we lose sight of that sometimes in this, don't we?
I'm not chucking cyanide down my neck.
Exactly.
No, I think that's a really, really good point, actually, and it's one that I had with somebody, a fellow gardener. So we were by a field. Lovely garden, but right next to the garden was a crop field that we know to be non-organic. And quite a lot of the shrubs in this garden are dying. And that just led me to thinking that they could be dying because there's poor soil. It could be just, not particularly nutrient-rich soil. Probably that's the case. But is it also potentially the Roundup and all the other pesticides that are being pumped and sprayed across the field? But then that got me thinking, is there, because I don't know, is there a study that has studied non-organic farmers and a rise in cancer or other conditions? Because given what we know about Roundup in particular, but also any other kind of pesticides and chemicals, you'd have to assume that as a farmer, if you're right at the coalface of that form of toxicity, surely you're going to suffer from ill health. However, I wonder if, and I don't know if there is a study, there could be a study that says absolutely all those farmers that are non-organic are all dying of cancer. I don't think there is that study. But let's say that there isn't. It could well be that they are able to cope with it because of their physical job, because of their products that they're putting inside them. You know, perhaps if I generalize, perhaps a lot of them don't eat processed food. I have to assume that they don't. Mm-hmm. So therefore, that goes back to what you've just said there. We can, as humans, consume small levels of toxicity if the rest of our life, and the book Dirty Genes talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
I haven't gone through the laundry list yet, actually, to figure out
which
my
one you
snips.
are. There's
my dirty genes, and I haven't even gone through the protocol yet, but I'm assuming that the protocol is exercise, restrict the amount of food that goes in, time-restricted eating, make sure you're eating colourful things on your plate, you know, all the basic simple stuff that we know.
Yeah.
And therefore you can have dirty genes that won't affect you. So for those that don't know the book Dirty Genes by Paul Lynch.
Ben
Lynch.
Excuse me.
Is proposing that you can make the statement that genetically I'm predisposed to be fat, but only part of that statement is true. So in other words, the genetics themselves can put you on a certain path if you then allow that dirty gene to remain dirty and clog it up with lack of exercise and poor diet and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what the book is all about. And also it's about the fact that everybody is born with dirty genes, but it's whether or not they get activated.
Exactly. What's the analogy? The genetics load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger.
Like it, yeah.
The only other thing I'd say is on something I've discovered in the newspapers or articles. Whenever the term study gets referenced, we immediately think credibility.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a spectrum of how studies are executed, right, and how they're made. And some of them are not made well, to put it frankly, and some of them
are independent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the whole red meat narrative that was created was basically done on what they call an epidemiology study, is what I learnt, which is basically just a survey of people filling in the foods that they eat. And obviously red meat, they'll put, I don't know, butter, yogurt, whatever meats it is. And in that segment of people that were used and seen as unhealthy, red meat was a part of that. It doesn't necessarily mean red meat, is it? They might have been having McDonald's burgers and everything else. But it's where I'm going with this is there is so many different types of studies that you can run. And when you see the term study, you shouldn't, the thing I fell victim to and always took as gospel was the fact that there's only one type, and it's going to be, you instantly think credibility, when actually there is such a wide spectrum.
Yep.
And if only people knew that there's interventional studies which are far more robust, basically ways of testing these hypotheses.
I think you're right. It's a bit like we discussed earlier, when somebody states this is scientifically backed, as I made that statement earlier.
The irony being it's still subjective.
Yeah. Exactly. People assume that because the word science has been chucked in the mix, that right, you should listen to that and take that as gospel.
Exactly.